Hello, everyone. I'm Jessie Cohen. I'm a co-founder of Canaries, and before I speak, I wanted to thank the other people who I started Canaries with, who were, in such difficult times, such a powerful force and such a wonderful community. Bonnie, Carolyn, Rebecca, Katya, thank you. So, to reintroduce a little bit and explain, Canaries is a support network for cis women, trans, and gender nonconforming people living with autoimmune conditions and other chronic illnesses. Our name is a reference to canaries in the coal mine, shorthand for those whose sensitivities are indicators of adverse conditions in the environment. We function as a support group with monthly meetings, a listserv of over 150 members, and an art collective. So I'd like to explain a little bit how we formed. And like so many stories that we're hearing today, this was born out of a personal experience. So I'm going to tell a little story from my life, but I think the story I'm telling, now having met hundreds of people with similar experiences, this is a story that could be many other people's story. For most of my life, I'd had a series of mystery ailments that multiplied with each passing year. Joint pain, hair loss, kidney disease, thyroid disease, debilitating depression and fatigue, issues with cognitive function, multiple food sensitivities, chemical sensitivities, to name a few. My symptoms had either been dismissed as exaggerations or simply unexplainable bodily malfunctions. Doctors told me that my diagnosable conditions were primarily autoimmune in nature, which, as they explained, meant my body was, and this is a quote, attacking itself for no reason. And a lot of people hear that. Your body is attacking itself is one thing, and for no reason is the kicker that some other lucky people get to hear as well. I was treated with a variety of immunosuppressants and chemotherapeutic drugs, and it was recommended that I look into taking antidepressants to manage my moods. The treatments diminished my diagnosed symptoms, but they gave me an array of new conditions which would then require more treatment. I was told there was no cure, no clear cause, and the best I could do was to manage my diseases with medications. And due to the invisible nature of most of the symptoms, I passed as able-bodied and healthy to those who didn't know me intimately. And I didn't know anyone else who had similar health problems, so I just accepted that my body was somehow off. Over the years, as medications worked for me less and less, I started to experiment with things like diet, managing stress levels, chemical and environmental factors, and found that this will sound funny to all of you because of what we're here talking about, but they seemed to have some kind of causal relationship to my symptoms. I had trouble finding doctors who were anything more than tolerant of my explorations, and by the time I was about 27, I still hadn't met anyone else who had similar conditions, or so I thought. While living in New York City, where I'm from, in 2013, through various flukes of fate, I happened to meet two people separately who, while they didn't have any of the same diagnoses I did, had various autoimmune conditions very similar to mine, and had experienced dismissal from doctors, treatment that made them sicker, invisible symptoms, and eventual discovery that there were correlations between food, chemicals, trauma, stress, and their illnesses. We had a lot to talk about, understandably, and so we decided to make a meeting all together and meet monthly. And another fluke that I'm so grateful for, a woman I went to college with, called me out of the blue. We'd been out of touch for a long time, and she said, I just got this diagnosis. I know you have some kind of health thing. I don't know what it is, but I know you do alternative stuff, and I just wanted to ask you if you had any ideas. They say it's rheumatoid arthritis, and that it's degenerative and there's nothing I can do, and they prescribed a medication. And I said, it's so funny that you're calling because I happen to meet two people who have the same diagnosis, and we're meeting monthly, so come. And so we had amazing conversations, and it really kind of opened the floodgates because none of us had had any community before whatsoever. So we did a lot of first just telling and listening, which was really good medicine. And then we started sharing strategies, ways that we're dealing with a medical system that's been failing us when we still have to interact with it. And we started to just have this experience which was so new, which was seeing our own lives mirrored back to us by each other. And so that kind of gave us confidence to say, if there was any doubt in our minds still that these things were real, we could eliminate that doubt. These things are very real, and it seemed like it's probably much more pervasive than we know. And so we, with each other's support, increasingly questioned the people who questioned us. And even when we had no language to describe what was happening to us, we supported each other in that wordlessness, and we made a lot of new words together, which we still use. And fortified by those meetings, we started to talk more openly about our illnesses in social situations. And people were coming out of the woodwork saying, my mother has something like that, my sister has something like that, my partner does, I do. And so I remember feeling in that time like, I used to wish that I wasn't alone, and now I'm sort of scared that I'm in such good company. So every time someone says, I have something like that, or I know someone who does, we'd say, invite them, come to our meetings. And the group was growing only through word of mouth, but it was really growing exponentially. And people were showing up with conditions ranging from Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, MS, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic fatigue, lupus, Lyme, chemical and mold sensitivity. Most of us had more than one of those things, and those categories were kind of bleeding into one another and also changing. People might come in with one diagnosis and then it would transform because the symptoms changed and the doctor gave it another name. Or people would come with no diagnosis. People would come with no health care, sometimes with no doctors. And so it was a really wide range of people, but a really striking similarity in our experiences and some of our strategies for healing. So nearly everyone who came had either never or very rarely spoken to anyone other than their doctor, if they even had one, or the people closest to them about their conditions. Nearly everyone was coming with the shame of not having had an adequate explanation or a name for what's happening, along with the frustration with their diagnosis, if they got one, awards them only medications which mask their symptoms, doesn't address root causes, put them at risk for more illnesses. And most people have been told at some point what they feel is wrong, it's psychosomatic, they're just stressed, depressed, lazy. People are often told, well, you look great. And so yeah, looking around the room, also, it was clear how totally invisible most of these illnesses are. We would never find each other in a crowd. So the importance of learning how to talk, having support in talking we really felt the gravity of that. As the months went by, we started talking about lots of different things: pesticides, GMOs, cleaning products, body products, toxic levels of stress and overwork, toxic medications, the circumstances of our birth and gestation, the balance of our gut flora, our internal ecosystems, ancestral trauma, environmental racism, classism. And through that, we came to this kind of realization, which I think many of us had had before, but which we could finally put into words, which is that this is not a mechanical failure, that our bodies are barometers for what's happening. We're registering imbalance and toxicity. Our symptoms are clear articulations of what's wrong. So it's not an individual problem, it's cultural, it's political, it's environmental. And I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit here because I think time is short, but I wanna tell you about how our listserv functions also. We had a lot of information circulating, and people would always be saying after meetings, can you just write that down for me, what you said? What do you do? What's that technique you do? What's that food you eat? How do you eat it? What's that doctor you're seeing that's been helpful? So we just started emailing, and the listserv happened. And I noticed that as it was growing organically, there were this kind of glaring difference between the symptoms of healthcare that most of us knew and how we were working was that there were no formulas ever. No one would say, well, I have this diagnosis and so do you, so let me tell you how to do it. Because we were watching each other and we saw that we reacted very differently to different things. Two people with the same diagnosis could have triggers that were different. People with a different diagnosis could have triggers that were the same, and it's just so kind of overlapping and mixed. So what we do, I would like to show you actually this conversation that I had a couple days ago with one of the Canaries, because I think it's representative of the kind of community that we built up and which is now so normal for us and which I hope can become so normal for more people. She was about to get on an airplane, which is really challenging for Canaries, and was worried because she was having some symptoms of her Crohn's. And she was thinking, this trip means so much to me, but I have to be realistic. I just don't know if I can go. And so I was checking in. I said, how are you doing? She said, hey, I'm good, solid poop, feeling okay, gonna give the flight a good old try. And I say, solid poop. And I can't even express how wonderful it is to be able to talk about bodily functions with people that you like and have it be normal. It's just a thing, every day, because it is our everyday. And I think one of the toxicities that I am talking about is the toxicity of the kind of isolation and the shame that is pretty universal. So most of us in the beginning were artists in this group because it was growing through word of mouth through our community, and we were artists, the ones who started meeting. So we started asking, this is interesting, we're talking about things that are really integral parts of our lives, but are we putting any of this in our work? Is this conversation in any way public? We do have a public forum that we know how to access. And the answer is pretty much no, most of us are not doing that. What would happen if we did do that? What sorts of things would we want to make? So we got together and wrote a manifesto, which I would like to read all of, but I'll pass. One of our, if anyone wants to see that later, I'll tell you how to see it. There are just so many things I want to show you. We are, in the beginning, we decided we wanted to make something that was kind of about the personal experience. Something that is totally non-existent in public spaces, especially urban spaces, which is a space that's just for rest, a place that's not for killing time between events, it's not for waiting, it's not a place of commerce, but just a place where you are invited to listen and sense deeply into yourself. So we called this the Zone, which is a reference to a Tarkovsky movie called Stalker, where there is an area which is a sort of fictionalized version of Chernobyl, which is a kind of government-restricted area of metaphysical trauma where threats cannot be specifically seen but can only be sensed. And we thought, that sounds very familiar. So this is our imagined kind of public antidote space for doing what's so forbidden for so many of us, which is just, or feels so forbidden, which is just to feel and take those feelings as true. So we had a zine that went along with the installation called Basic Exercises for Embodiment. And we had different exercises, embodiment exercises. And this is an example of one of the exercises. We had some quotes. This one says, despite all our desperate eternal attempts to separate, contain, and mend, categories always leak. And this is a pain chart that people often use in hospitals or with doctors to explain what's so hard to explain, which is the level of pain. This is a project we did at a space in downtown Manhattan called Recess, which is a storefront space. It was a residency for 2 months. And this is a classic disability slogan from the 90s, nothing about us without us. And we, as artists, we're working often with materials that are totally toxic. This is pretty common. And so going into a new space which has been previously occupied by only artists and non-stop was tough. So we did a lot of things beforehand, like mold remediation, and here's something from our Instagram, which is one of many things we did like this. These are some pillows off-gassing, because buying things on a budget, we weren't able to get everything with materials that were safe for us, but at least we could do a few things to kind of limit our exposures together. We had a library in the front of the space, which had a lot of books from our personal collections that we just kind of all got together and said, what have you read, what have you found that's been helpful, just along your path in any way at all with regard to your health. And here are some examples of some things we had on the shelf. The reading room, we had some free tea, we had the space to rest. It turned out that while we had many events and lots of ideas about how this space was going to be and like all of the action that would take place, it was pretty clear early on that what people needed so much, which shouldn't have been a surprise to us, was just a place to relax, to rest, to take a nap. People would come in and just crash. And people would come in and just sit with friends and talk in a way that in New York City is hard to do. It's hard to find a place where you can just be with each other. So this project started to become kind of a catalyst to go into a larger community and talk about networks of care in general. Do we have them? We need them, because there are a lot of us who are very sick, very young, and it seems like we're getting sicker and it seems like we're multiplying. So how can we have something in place that can give us community so we can be there for each other? We had free craniosacral sessions in the evening people could sign up for. We had daily lunchtime meditations. This is some people chatting after one of them. This is from our day-to-day calendar that we had posted on the wall, and this is an example of something that happened often. It says, Catherine's body radically refused to work today. So something that we work on all the time and struggle with also, even though we are ourselves, is how to make structures that don't pressure us beyond our capacity. How to make, what does it look like to have a collaborative project or to work on a kind of schedule which is malleable, which is forgiving, where if you can't come in, someone else can. Or maybe you say, actually, that event isn't happening today. That's okay. And this was a space where it was interesting because it was a space where we had total permission to experiment that way, and so it gave us the opportunity to see how much we had actually internalized, many of us, this idea that we really had to perform. And that was helpful to see. So here's one of the first events we had. It was a community meeting, and it was the topic was a prompt. It was come in with a story of either a surplus or a lack of care that you've experienced. And this is the talk on fecal matter transplants, which maybe some of you have heard of. They're not approved for people to have done by doctors or in hospitals, except for certain conditions, one of which I know is C. diff. But they're helpful for many people. So there's a movement of doing fecal matter transplants at home with friends or family or donors who have healthy poop. Because as we've learned, our gut and our internal ecosystem plays a huge role in our health. This is an event with death doulas, Sarah Lee Gallen, Roxanne Baker. They work with people as a support at end of life. Maybe some of you have heard of birth doulas. It's like that, but for dying. And so this is a conversation that is taboo across many ages, but we thought this is something we want to bring into a space that's our space. My time is up, so I'm going to just say, I wish I could show you everything. This is another project, Notes for the Waiting Room, which we invited people to distribute in waiting rooms. You saw some pictures before. There they are. My favorite part, I think, of the whole Notes for the Waiting Room is this part of our questionnaire that we wrote. And yeah, in closing, I just want to say that I think I've learned and we've learned through working as a group that to say that our feelings are facts is really a matter of survival, and we need to support each other in that in this time when we feel we have no maps to navigate. And it's not so much right now, our focus is not about fixing it, it's not about finding cures, it's more about finding alternatives, finding a way to build a commons of knowledge, something open source with bridges between specializations, communication, connection, and most importantly, community, because we can't do this by ourselves and we don't have to. And I just want to say to everyone living with these conditions, we're with you and you're not alone. Thank you.